Welcome back to the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. Coming up, we have a book about what it's like to relive domestic violence when your abuser shows up decades later. Two women who take revenge years after they were victims of kidnapping and child abuse. A minister writes about faith with his atheist, agnostic, and apathetic friends in mind. We answer the question, what could termites and effective business principles possibly have in common? But first, meet Terence Gills, who's found the key to selling erotic romance novels. He started building an audience in 2020 when he published his first book through Page entitled Choice. Now he's back with his second book, Seduced. It's about a woman who only wants what she gives, and that's unconditional love. Terence, what's your secret?
It may sound weird to you, but the words never go away. Like I can almost see the words. And every novel that I want to write, when I wrote Choice, my first novel, I could see every word. It's almost like I could hear it in my head. And it would be months sometime before I would pick up the pen, or if I would get on the computer and write again. But the words never disappear. They're always there.
You're a lucky man. What inspired Seduced?
Loving yourself. I see so many individuals in our society now, that male and female, that struggle with learning how to love and respect themselves. So they go to social media platforms, I think, to figure out what love is to them, or what they think love might be. Or they look to society to tell them what or how to love themselves. And you can't do that. You have to teach society and everyone else around you how to love you, because no social media platform or society can teach you that.
Is your story based on anything in reality?
Well, I did take everything. My main character, Simone, I did take a lot from my personal life, not necessarily saying things that happened to me, but just people around me. Say, for instance, in my family and my friends, and just individuals that I've met throughout life, as far as the military is concerned and in civilian life, and the young ladies that I've met and the men that I've talked to. She is a young lady who is married, who thinks that life is just peaches and cream. Everything is going great because she loves unconditionally. There's nothing else in front of her except her husband, who she adores a lot. As she moves through life, she discovers something else differently. So she decides to choose societal ways of love instead of sticking with her own design of love. She chooses what society says love is, and it leads her down a unfamiliar path, in later in her life, or as her life progresses on. She changes her entire lifestyle to what society will love, or what she thinks society might love.
At some point, does she have a reckoning of sorts?
And she does. She does have a reckoning, but by the time she has the reckoning, I think her life has been altered to a point where she can go back and she can change a lot of things and turn things around, but she continues to travel down the same pathway.
So that pathway, does she settle for things that maybe she wouldn't otherwise settle for if she had followed her heart?
Correct. And she gives her husband all the unconditional love that he can possibly handle. But he is not reciprocal of that. He does not appreciate that, nor does he give her the same type of love back. So that entails and charges her to go out and change her entire life, emotionally, change it, physically change it to society's standards of what that love might look like. And that was an unfamiliar path for her. It was something that she wasn't ready for. But the success of that type of lifestyle, on one hand, powered her to continue to go and to move forward with it. But on the other hand, it was sort of self-destructive.
Okay, so we find out at the end whether she changes course or just stays with what she knows.
Yes, you do.
Hmm. So this is your second book.
Yes.
Have you been able to develop a following of sorts?
Somewhat, yes. I've only been an author for 6 years, so I think a lot of people find it interesting, first of all, that I'm male and a romance writer. Second of all, African American. So, I mean, a lot of people that I've talked to want me to, especially the publishers, not necessarily use it as a bad thing, but use it sort of as my advantage. You know, that I'm a male and I'm black. I'm a black male that writes romance. Because in my understanding, there's not a lot of black male writers, romance writers in this industry.
Hmm.
So that has helped me somewhat to be a male romance writer because a lot of females do find it interesting. And how am I going to captivate their mind into knowing the feelings and expressions of a female?
Right.
They find it a little bit difficult to for a male to understand the emotional female mindset.
Yeah. So how do you communicate with your audience?
So I have done like for choice, I did a lot of marketing myself, and that's just word of mouth. I did a lot of book signings. I was on or in featured inside the Heat magazine. I think it was 2019. I can't remember, but Lenny Kravitz, who was there on the cover of that particular magazine that year. Um,
How did you make that happen?
I called him. I called a magazine a company, and I said, "Hey, I am a new author. I have a story that I'd like to share with everyone. And what do I need to do to get my book in your magazine?" And they told me exactly what to do, and I did that. And they gave me a 3 or 4 page spread in the Heat.
What are you going to do for this one?
Same thing, like I'm going to follow the same steps. Um, I say in 2020, my book was actually in Barnes and Nobles on the shelves,
Wow.
and I was in Massachusetts at that time, and my book was on the shelves, and I did a book signing in Massachusetts at Barnes and Nobles,
Hmm.
and then I spread it from there to Alabama, to Georgia, to Florida, to Tennessee, as far as Barnes and Nobles, and they were all in those stores. Hmm.
You did book signings in all these states and you set them up yourself.
I did, and the books were on physically on the shelves.
See, that's really
Yes,
good. Sounds like you really get behind your book.
I do, because I believe in it, and I think as an author, if you don't believe in the product that you're trying to put out there to get other people to see, then nobody else is. So you have to stand behind 100% stand behind what you are trying to create. No matter if it doesn't matter at this point where if others might see or may not see your vision, it's up to you to get them to understand what type of writer you are, who you are, what you're writing about. Build your audience, and it takes work. You can't just, I think a lot of authors think that they can just write things, put it out there, and boom, it's just going to automatically take off.
Yep.
You're going to be a number one, you're going to be a New York bestseller. No, it doesn't work like that. You got to put in the time and the work to create yourself, just like you create your characters in your book.
You're also doing social media.
Correct.
You're telling people, hey, I'm going to be at the Barnes and Noble in Kentucky. Come see me there. Like, I think that's an important component. And, I have authors say to me, I don't know how to use social media. I don't know anything about social media. I'm shy. And I feel really bad. I mean, if you have any advice for people who feel that way.
In this industry, you can if you want to be a successful author, you cannot be shy. You can't be. You're in the wrong business because you're in the business of, so to speak, entertainment, so to speak.
Mm.
Because whether you're writing fiction, nonfiction, you're still the author. And there are individuals who are going to want to talk to you. There are individuals who are going to ask you questions about your novel. They want to know who you are. They want to know about your novel. They want to know all aspects of it, especially if they're going to invest their time and their money into what you've created. And if you want to become that household name, you have to get out there and speak to the public and tell them exactly who you are, what type of writer you are, what novels you've written, what is your novel about. Let's discuss it. In order for you to gain that following, you cannot be shy in this industry. You have to get out there and promote yourself, or you're never going to go anywhere.
Do you engage people online as well?
Oh, yes. I do all the time. Like I put my books on Instagram now, both of them, Choice and Seduce, and I boosted it. What that means is, I I I took and I paid for a certain period of time, of days, so to speak,
Mm-hmm.
to push my book to people that it might not get to outside of my friend zone. So people who have absolutely no idea who I am, Instagram took and they boosted it to that audience.
All good advice, Terence Gills, author of Seduced. Thanks.
Hey, it was wonderful, and I appreciate you for calling.
What do termites and business principles have in common? Emmanuela E. explains in her book, The Termites' Effects, Unlocking 25 Success Principles for Personal Growth. So this book came out of an experience in the backyard of your home in Nigeria.
It was raining that night around 2 a.m. and usually the termite comes out just shortly after the rain. You see them everywhere. Back in Africa or in Nigeria, we have different kinds of termites. The wood termites that are destructive and the edible termites. So the one I'm referring to here is the edible termites.
Okay.
Yeah. So when I came out at night on my balcony, it was filled with termites. I was like, what's going on here? I didn't understand because there was power outage. So when I put on my flashlight, the next thing I discovered, they came clustering on my flashlight. So what that meant was that the light was attracting them. And it was because of the light too on my balcony that they all came to my balcony, because other places were dark. There was power outage that night, but there was light in my building. So, and that was it. I didn't call it anything. I wanted to go back to bed, but then I heard that voice say, go back and observe these little creatures. I was like, what? So I went back and I obeyed. Sat down on my balcony, 2 a.m. at night, watching, and then they all clustered on my flashlight. I brought another flashlight, another swarm of them clustered. So that was when the first principle dropped, which is principle of attraction, that the light I carry was attracting them.
Right.
In other words, anything you're doing, whatever it is you're doing, it has to be attractive enough to attract the attention of the intended people. So even in business, the law of attraction plays an important role. Before someone can say yes to whatever you're offering, the person must first be attracted by your offer. So that's the genesis of the whole thing. But before I knew it, I spent like 2 hours with them that night. Over about 25 principles dropped under 2 hours. But it took me years, though, to now sit back and develop them.
What did you end up writing about?
So I wrote about, the book is on 25 success principles for personal and professional growth. Yeah, so little things we ignore in life and business that could actually be the change we need in our business or in our lives. So I came up with 25 principles that night, ranging from principle of attraction, principle of timing, that in everything there's always a time. You should always have a time frame for whatever you're doing. Principle of value. You must have a value you are passing out to people. Now, because I had the light became a value to the termites. So that value I carry attracted them because I have what they needed at that point in time. So the question will always be, what value is your offer passing out to people? And then so many other: comfort zone, fragility, principle of pride, principle of creativity, discipline, consistency, positioning, patience, customer care, principle of innovation, diligence, principle of weakness, principle of no assumption. In other words, don't always assume a state of thing exists. Always follow it to a logical conclusion. Don't assume people won't buy your offer. Don't assume people don't need what you carry. Put it out there. Let them make the decision whether they will want it or not, instead of assuming that nobody would want to buy or buy a key to whatever you're offering. So, and then we have a lot of them principle of bad signals. You should always watch out for bad red flags in your business. For instance, that night I noticed another bigger set of something that looked like termites. I thought they were bigger termites, but looking closely, I discovered that they were actually preying on the termite, eating them up. Right? So in your business too, sometimes there are red flags you need to watch out for. It could be your colleagues, it could be people you're working with, it could be your employees, coming up with certain characters that is silently destroying your business without you knowing it. So it's deep. It's actually deep.
It is, but it makes so much sense.
Yeah.
Are there any particular points where we fall down, where we tend to fall down? Do we get to a point? Do we give up too easily?
Definitely. That's where we have a consistency and the principle of consistency and persistency. Both of them are kind of sort of two-edged sword, let me call it that way. Because in life, at a point, okay, let me say I wrote that book based on the story as it was going. At a point, I got tired. I just gave up. I said, everything is finished. I think I need to now go back to bed. But I said, go back. I'm not done yet. Because I thought the termites were no longer coming. I have captured all the ones that flew. I gathered all of them. But before I knew it, I sat back. A few minutes later, more came back from other places. So I'm like, this is consistency. Most times we give up so soon. We give up so easily. We do things we are not consistent, probably because we are not getting the results we desire. And then we give up. So the principles comes from the story as it's going. If you just listen to it, you may not really understand a whole lot, but when you now follow the storyline, which is why a lot of people that have read the book, one thing they tell me is, the moment I picked it up to read, I couldn't drop it because I needed to know what happened in the next chapter. I needed to know what happened between the termites and you and what next. So it's so kind of is inspiring and very, very filled with suspense too. One of my colleagues in my workplace one time told me, when she read, I gave her that book as a gift. She took it home that day, came back to the office the next day with swollen eyes and was like, Emma, I didn't sleep. I said, why? He said, the book kept me awake. I really wanted to know what happened in the next chapter. Then I kept reading and reading. Before I knew it, it was 3:30 to 4 a.m. and I need to be at work this morning. But I finished it, by the way. And it's so interesting that I gave it to my son and said, you need to read this book. So it's filled with inspiration and natural experience, natural environment. This is my own personal encounter. Until tomorrow, when I go through that book, I still feel the same way as if I'm just reading it for the first time.
Yeah. Now, you say you're a speaker, you're a life coach. Are you?
Yeah.
Is that how you're telling people about this book?
When I talk about the book, I talk about the book mostly about principles that we need to adhere to as business people, or as even in our relationship too. Because I believe that business and relationship, they'll go hand in hand. I've hosted a few events where people came. I've been in a book authors gathering where I presented my book.
Nice.
And there was it was a kind of competition. There were other authors. We were about a total of 6 to 7 authors that came. At the end, my book won an award for the best book. And a lot of people bought the book that day. There wasn't, because after each author comes out and talk about the book, his or her book. And at the end, there will be an election, secret ballot system kind of a thing for you to choose. And my book won, in fact, 2/3 of the vote.
Wow. Where was this?
In Georgia here, Smyrna. Someone gave me the contact and I called the organizers and then registered for it. It's called AAAS.
Oh, okay. That's the International Association of African Authors and Scholars.
So the book won the best. I won an award that very day.
Wow.
And then I've also hosted my own personal event for book signing where people bought the book. I just explained the book and everything. I said, it's my first book. From what I explained, whatever you're led in your heart to support the work. And a lot, some supported with $100, $200, $50, $25. Though the price of the book is $15. Well, by the time I spoke about the worth of the book, they were willing to give more than there was. Some of them bought 5, 10. They said, we're going to give it out as gift. So
great.
Yeah.
Okay. You going to keep writing?
I have 4 as we speak.
4 books that you're ready to?
Yeah, because this book actually inspired me to when I hear the testimonies, when people tell me this book, it's inspiring. It inspired me. I learned a lot of things and I couldn't drop it. That was encouraging. That was fulfilling. So I wrote 4 other books after this book. Mostly, I always write from my personal experiences and my pain. Like the second book I wrote was on passion discovery. Discover, develop, and monetize your passion. And that also came from a place of pain because for years I worked hard to get promotion and everything. It was so frustrating before I decided to go into entrepreneurship. So, most times your whatever you're hoping to do, your passion lies in something that gives you pain. So it was born out of that pain. So the book is titled Passion to Profit, book 1. Then I have book 2 of it too, which talks about tools and resources to build your business digitally. So that is, yeah.
Excellent. So maybe we will talk again.
Yeah, definitely.
You are Emmanuela E. Uobi, author of The Termites Effects, Unlocking 25 Success Principles for Personal and Professional Growth. Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate it.
Wes Wright has been a minister and college professor for over 40 years in Oregon. He's written sermons, book reviews, theology journals, magazine articles, but this is his first book. Now, Wes, you say, Everybody Lives by Faith, Random Reflections, Essays, and Observations of a Christ Follower was written with your atheist, agnostic, and apathetic friends in mind.
Well, I have lots of unbelieving friends. My wife teases me that I collect unbelieving friends, but I have a real heart for them. We're an independent Christian church, Restoration Movement church, but each church is locally led by its elders, and I work for the elders. And I've been here a little over 18 years at this church.
All right. So did something happen? Like, did somebody in particular just hit a nerve and you said, I got to write this book, man. I'm done with this?
Well, not really. Other than that, I've always been pretty deep into what's called apologetics, which is the kind of an arm of theology that talks about why we believe what we believe, this kind of thing. And so I've kind of always led that. But I had an associate minister here and a previous church administrator here said, you got to start writing this stuff down. And so when COVID hit, they said, now's the time. And so I started, the whole book is just a collection of just different essays or different conversations I've had with my friends, many of who are now Christians. Many are not yet, but in different stages of the process, and I'm just asking my friends to give an honest look at who Jesus is and what he's done for them and for all of us. Or as Pascal would say, every seeker eventually finds, and if you take everything out of it and say, I refuse to believe anything but the truth, you become a believer. And that's what it was for me. It was I would not lie to myself, and I kind of argued myself into the Christian faith. So
What do you talk about?
I talk about why it is that some people are, it's really about the apatheist, which is not a word I created. It's probably not even technically an English word, but those who don't know and don't care. Okay. And I want to point them toward why caring should be their first priority, that we only get one shot at life. And so understanding what it's about is the most important thing that any person can do. And I use Blaise Pascal, in his book, The Pensée, as sort of the backdrop for all this, because he did a lot for me just reading his book from, he lived 400 years ago.
Right.
But his thoughts, that's what Pensée means, his thoughts about why he became a follower of Jesus in his 30s. He died at the age of 39, died very young. And why, and all the things that he did with that really began to shape the way I look at things. And we can live very disordered lives, where we're pursuing this, pursuing that, pursuing the other thing, trying to find happiness. But the surest route to our happiness is not trying to find happiness. That's the byproduct of something else. And that's pursuing holiness. And by holiness, I don't mean keeping a bunch of rules. I mean understanding who you are as a person in the image of God. When you understand that, you find happiness come trailing along right behind it. But if we're always pursuing the next big thing, or the diversion of, I use the diversion of sports and shopping and even sex, we're pursuing these things that ultimately won't satisfy, because they're not designed to satisfy that. They come along, those things, happiness is the byproduct of finding yourself following after Christ. And it's the best possible life. And I tell my unbelieving friends, I said, just take God out of it, take Jesus out of it if you want to. Just look at just look at the moral prescriptions of Scripture. If everybody actually loved their spouse, actually loved them, what would that do? And the whole culture decided to do that, what would happen? And they say, well, there would never be a divorce, there'd never be a broken family, there'd never be an abused child, there'd never be an abused spouse, and all these. I said, so even if you just take the moral parameters of Scripture, it's not about putting their thumb on people. It's about actually giving them a better life, a happier life. Wouldn't it be a better life if we knew that when we gave love, it was returned to us in the same way? And all these issues in our society would just clear up overnight if we just practice that one moral prescription. So I say, if we were committed to that, it would be life transforming, it would be community transforming, it would transform an entire nation and world.
Do unto others.
Yeah.
If we all
actually live that way, it would change the world.
Yeah, it would. Yeah, it would.
But then you have to root that in something, because you can't define good without God.
I see.
You have to have some ultimate way to define it.
Right.
So,
well, you're a minister. Do you talk about your book from the pulpit?
Sometimes I just, I've been putting on Facebook. I've got this thing, and I've given away a lot of them to friends. It's actually selling by the ones and twos. I'm not a famous author. I preach at a small church in the Northwest, in the most atheistic city of its size in the country, and I'm just this guy, right? I have my earned doctorate. I teach at a university here in theology and philosophy. I teach Greek and Hebrew and Aramaic. Right now I'm teaching an Old Testament survey course. I do all these things. Mm-hmm. I'm not a dummy.
Clearly.
But I just want people to get an honest hearing, an honest search for who Jesus is and what he could mean for them.
Are you going to keep writing?
I hope to. Right now, I've got the research done. I just started putting pen to paper, as it were. one of the things that I've known around here for is talking about the holidays. There's this myth, for example, that Christmas was a pagan holiday that was co-opted by Christians, when in fact it's actually the reverse. Christians were celebrating Christmas for at least 150 years, and probably more like 300 before pagans, Aurelius and those guys decided to co-opt that date and make it a pagan holiday.
Right. I mean, weren't we were celebrating the birth of Jesus, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Long before there was ever
Long
any
before.
sort of pagan holiday associated with it. Yeah. In the same way with Easter, and the same way with Halloween as it is. These have always been Christian holidays. And so I've done some writing about that. I've done a couple of magazine articles about that and things. And one of my elders said, you really need to put these essays into a book. And
All right.
so it'll be briefer essays, probably 1 or 2 pages, but each and about those 3 holidays in particular. That's one thing. I've just started writing about that. I'm 63, almost 64, so I thought, well, get some things out there and see what happens.
It's worth it. You are Wes Wright, author of Everybody Lives by Faith, Random Reflections, Essays, and Observations of a Christ Follower. Thanks so much for talking to me.
Well, thanks for taking the time.
As a nurse and retired military, domestic violence was something Naomi Nelson knew all about. It was something she always wanted to write about, but it wasn't until she read a book that inspired her to write her own. It is entitled The Nut in the Shell.
Just through family experience, personal experience, my career, I've, had a lot of interactions with either knowing someone or, being related or affiliated with someone that's unfortunately experienced some type of domestic violence. So I had wanted to write a story related to that. And I kind of had an idea for a story for several years, a title. I just never had really thought that I could write a book. And I actually had read a book many years ago I had seen the story on the news, read the book that the lady published later in life. And it was her story of her experience. And I remember we were on vacation and I was reading the tail end of the book, and I got to the end of the book, and just out of the blue, tears started coming down my cheek. And I thought, my gosh, I can't believe this book touched me that much. So then it in a sense inspired me, because I thought if I could put something into words that even one person reading, it would touch them and inspire them, it would be worth writing. And that kind of started it off.
So Abby is based on a real person?
Correct. It's a fictional story, but it's I think accumulation of several people.
Well, I mean, it sounds like she's got her life together, pretty much. Like she's got a pretty good life going on, and then boom.
Correct. And I think that's, that was one of the things I wanted to try and accomplish through the book, was that, not necessarily just to maybe help someone that is somewhere in that journey or struggle, but maybe somebody that knows someone, and maybe just have them look with a little more enlightened eye, maybe a little different level of understanding, and maybe even give them peace if they know someone that's going through it or have gone through it and they don't understand, the situation or why they're still in the situation.
What happened to Abby?
This is a young woman that, again, as you said, her life has kind of moved on. This is almost her second life. There was a first life for her when her children were younger, a first marriage, a first, experience, relationship. And she kind of had moved on. She's put herself together, established herself for her career. But I don't think she's gotten through all the post-traumatic experiences and stress from that. And, a lot of times when you go through something like that, the time it comes back to haunt you is when you are in a safe place.
Okay.
So I think that's, she's, in another life, other children and her career. And then it just kind of starts to come in when she doesn't want it to come in. And she's thought she's already dealt with it.
Okay, so it's her first husband and he's back. Now, is that where you
Correct.
cut it off? He's back and then we go to the next book, or what did he do to
Yeah.
her?
So
And-
actually in this story, it's going to completely break her down. And then she's going to have to go back with the help of her family and some therapists, and she's going to have to go back and relive that to really come to a level of functionality and a level of putting that in the right place, which she's, I think at that point in her life, she thought she did. And then she really hadn't addressed it. She had just kind of moved on.
So what did
And I think
he abused her emotionally, physically? What was the deal
correct.
with them?
Yes,
Both?
correct. Yes,
And they had kids together.
correct.
And she
Yep.
was able to get it together to get away from him, but this happens all the time. You think you're over it. Women think they're,
Yeah.
And she's, all of a sudden he comes back into her life.
Right.
Oh,
And
boy.
then it's at a time when, like I said, many years later, where she's, gone on with her career, gone on with her, her family, it's a memory in the past that, at the time she had done what she needed to get out of the situation. But again, I think it's not just, my book, again, gives the reader, they go through the journey, but to go through the journey, you have to go back through the journey with her. And unfortunately, like I said, she has to go back and relive all that, and the reader goes along on that. And then, where she comes out, it's, again, it's a hard read in the sense of it's very truthful. But I felt like if I was going to write this, it should be very genuine, to be respectful of somebody that's been through that, and also in a sense to connect with someone wherever they are in that journey, and to maybe, like I said, hopefully give them, a little bit of light at the end of the tunnel. Again, somebody maybe that knows somebody, a little bit of, maybe understanding, peace, and just in general, I think there's, I don't want to say a stigma, but maybe a stigma of people thinking, oh, it's a certain type of person, it's a certain type of lifestyle, a certain type of, and it's really not. I think it's just, I think a good phrase is that, if you care about somebody, you open yourself up to everything that comes with that person. And sometimes it's not somebody's intent to be in that situation. They just end up in that situation.
Right.
It's like I said, not a certain type of person, not a certain type of, it's just where life leads you,
How are you sharing this book?
So when I wrote the book, I made a commitment to donate a certain portion of the royalties to domestic violence shelters and resources.
Great.
So I have donated some books to some of my local shelters, and I also have been doing some women's groups and some book signings and some book clubs. So just trying to get it, get the book out there.
How are you finding these shelters and book clubs? What's your process there?
Of course, through Fulton, Barnes and Noble, some book signings there. I've had a couple of local organizations reach out to me, and then through going to those, again, being a veteran, I've had a couple of veteran organizations reach
Okay.
out to me. And then I, just word of mouth, actually, I've had a few people reach out to me that have read the book and told someone about the book. And it's kind of ironic, just in discussing general overview of the book with people at book signings and different things, people come up to me and they kind of open up a little bit about someone they know or something they've personally experienced and, are interested in the book.
It resonates.
Yeah. I was I will admit, when I was going to write the book, it's not a subject everybody writes about. It's a hard subject to write about. But again, I felt like it was an important subject to write about.
Yeah.
And I've gotten a lot of great feedback. A lot of people have read the book and just come up and hugged me.
Oh,
They've said it's a definitely, it's an emotional ride, no matter what their story is, like I said, or they know somebody's story. So again, I feel that that's good because I felt like to truly have a level of understanding or connection, like I did with that one book, you really have to go on the journey.
yeah.
So it's a little, like I said, a little bit of a raw read at points, but again, I felt like that was the only way to do the book justice or anybody that would read it.
Why the title, The Nut in the Shell?
So I had that title for a while. My thought behind the book was that kind of twofold. One is that, again, someone could have had this experience or something similar, and it may be somebody that the shell, you would never expect it to be that person. And then I think that no matter where they fall in this, this area of experience, there is a part that there's something inside a shell that is just complete havoc and complete at that moment.
Right.
But, for whatever they're feeling, they don't want to expose that.
Right.
So they put on a shell. It's not something that anybody is, going to say, hey, I mean, a lot of people really don't say, hey, I want to, grow up, or I want to live 10 years in a domestic violence relationship. It's not you almost have to make that connection with someone. It's not somebody's just going to usually just open up to. So they usually are, kind of living in their own shell with all that havoc. And unfortunately, sometimes feel very alone in that shell. So it seemed appropriate.
Well, you're on a journey, Naomi. I'll say that. How many more books do you think related to this?
I had a whole story in mind, but it would be really long. So there would be three books.
Good.
Because a lot of women and children
Mm-hmm.
that are involved in this. And I think if you come out on the other side, your worst nightmare would be to have your children or someone you love or your daughter go through this.
Right.
Or end up in this. So there's two more books to come. Hopefully the reader will be engaged enough that they'll want to know what happened to Abby, because you kind of know where she lands. You don't know what happens next. So
Okay.
that would be the second book. And then there is a third book. So it's really kind of from Abby's perspective, and you kind of go through those journeys and some monumental things that happen in her life in a 3-book journey.
Okay. Naomi Nelson, author of The Nut in the Shell. You have a great day.
Thank you. I appreciate your time.
What happens when two girls who were kidnapped and abused as children grow up? Delbra Moore gave that idea some thought and came up with her book entitled Hell and Back, Now Comes Revenge. Delbra.
So much goes on in life. And I love women and I love children. And I don't want to see anything happen to them. And I hear so much. And some of it just blow my mind. But then I know it's true. And this book would help so many young women to hold on to their children, because some things you just don't know. And some things that people really do think that happens to other people, but not to them.
Like children getting kidnapped?
Right. 2 girls, they were kidnapped outside playing, riding bikes. You know how children ride bikes, and some just out playing. And if you're not out there watching them, anyone can take them. And it was just 2 men that rode around all the time looking for girls to kidnap. They was tired of raping women out on the street, rape them and kill them, leave them in alleys. And this boy's grandmother left him a house. There was a door that opened to a room downstairs. And that's where they kept the girls, downstairs in this room.
How many girls?
6. And they decided to paint the room, fix it up really nice. But they didn't know how to take care of them when they cycles started and all that kind of stuff. They decided they had to kidnap a nurse. And they sat at different hospitals until they found a nurse. And they kidnapped the nurse and they took her there. And that was her job, to take care of the girls.
So there was no way out of here? Was this place in the middle of nowhere?
Nowhere. They had acres. And, everyone had horses. Some of them had cows. And it was acres. So they had a lot of privacy. And the 3 boys, 2 of them worked. And one of them lived there upstairs to help take care of the girls.
Did any of them try to get away?
No, because they boarded up. They had small windows downstairs in the home, but they boarded those up. But even if they didn't board them up, those girls couldn't have climbed through them. They was very small. They was long and very small.
So what happens to these girls?
They notice how much the men drink. When the other 2 come over, they realize how much they drink. And they decided that that's the only way that they might have a chance of getting away. They became best friends living there because they were going through hell. The men was calling them upstairs to rape them whenever they wanted them. And that was a lot. And they realized that they wanted the girls to start drinking to relax. So they learned them how to drink wine.
Do these girls manage to escape?
Someone in the neighborhood just knew something and called the police, but that was years later. They were 7 and 8. They only wanted young girls. They didn't want women. They wanted children. They didn't want women at all. One of the men, he told one of the men at 13 was too old when they were out looking. And children was easier because they was out playing all the time and riding their bikes. They found 2 twins out riding their bike together. And the twins would always stop at this house where no one lived in the house. But for some reason, they would go to that house and play on that porch. And the van happened to be following them. And they drove that van up right at the porch and they just pulled them in. And that was the way, pretty much, how they took them. They just rode around in poor neighborhoods where they figured that people doesn't care, that the kids just out there playing by themselves.
Does somebody finally catch these guys?
Yes, someone finally catch them, and the girls grew up, but they never received any counseling afterwards. The 2 girls, Linda and June, the best friends, but they were strong. They became very strong. They started getting jobs. They were working at an animal hospital. The thing about it, is that they knew they would be there together and it would only be two. They weren't ready to be around people. Working there, they had a little small television there. And June would have the television on all the time. And she started wanting revenge. And she convinced Linda about this revenge. And she said, how? They in jail, they in prison. So how can we get revenge from them? She said, we can get revenge another way. And that is other rapists. And they start hunting down, finding out men, finding out rapists. They spent time in the courts, just sitting back in the back and just trying to locate men who rape so they could take care of them. And they would take care of them. They would kill them. They would punish them. And they punished several men. And they didn't want to do it in their hometown where they was living. Linda told her, if we do this, we need to drive at least for 2-3 hours so that the police wouldn't think it's us or wouldn't want to question all rapists. It wouldn't come back to us in no kind of way for question.
What do they do to these men?
They just done different things to them. Some of them, they cut their penis off, tied them to a tree. They just punished them for rape. But it's all because of no counseling. No counseling was involved to help these girls with what happened to them.
So at the end, we find out whether they get away with it.
Right.
Are you going to keep writing?
Of course.
Keep writing about like social evils, social ills?
Yeah, I am. I like it. I like writing about it, and it's a lot in my head, and I want to bring it all out. And it all comes out with one glass of wine. One glass.
That's your secret.
That's my secret. One glass. That's all I need. It just start coming. Nothing comes out without the glass of wine.
Delbra, you've got a heck of a story here. Whew. Thank you so much. Thanks for talking to me. Delbra Moore, author of Hell and Back, Now Comes Revenge.
Thank you for calling.
We hope you enjoyed this edition of the ReaderHouse Author Roundtable, where authors from all walks of life come together to discuss the trials, tribulations, and triumphs of publishing their books. I'm Alice Stockton Rossini. We hope to see you back here every Saturday night at 8 o'clock, or listen to our podcast anytime on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Stitcher, TuneIn, and PodServe, just to name a few. The Author Roundtable is sponsored by ReaderHouse Online Bookstore, where independent new authors come first.